And we are recording. Hey, everybody, I am back with another video today. I wanted to do a video on the topic of people saying that they want to be able to write a book, which is an awesome idea, but they haven't really gotten down to the points of what it is that they want to be able to write, and they haven't really tested out what it is that they wanted. A book is um, a book can be a a big investment. It's a big investment on time. It's a big investment on your personal energy. And if you want to be able to do it well, you need to be able to write the book, with people like editors or a book coach like I am, so that you can actually write the best book possible. And so I wanted to be able to share a way that you can actually use Substack to be able to help you to practice on a few points that I think are really important in writing your book. So let's get started. Let's talk about the gap in your audience, where your traffic is coming from. If it's coming from your particular business, you might have a list of existing clients if you're a business owner, like if you're a coach, or you have a brick and mortar business, you have some sort of a service business, and you want to be able to write a book about your particular story. Well, you know what happens is a lot of people may not be used to hearing your particular story. And so if you write a book that's talking about, your particular, life journey with learning how to be able to be a single father or a single mother, that might be different from the actual business that you actually run. And so people are not necessarily ready to read that story. And so that book may not move in the way that you might want it to. So just because you have an email list of people doesn't necessarily mean that you have an email list that is ready to be able to buy that book. I hope that makes sense. Just because you have a list of clients that use your services, it does not necessarily mean that you have a list of people who are ready to read your book. So writing your book, without any input on what people are interested, or even that they even know this part of you, it's kind of like a shot in the dark. So you're sort of guessing at what people want to be able to read, and you throw in, a good 6 months to a year of labor, because a memoir actually takes a lot of time to be able to write. It takes a lot of time to be able to write. And so you put in a lot of extra time and a lot of extra energy to be able to writing this big thing. And you're just kind of hoping that it lands with people. And if you think about it, you wouldn't do that in any other part of your business. You wouldn't. You test things. You don't just create, if you want to be able to write a course, in your business, you don't sit there and spend 2-3 months writing a course that you're not sure that anybody is going to buy. It's the same thing with your book. Same exact thing with your book. And so what you really need to be able to think about is that you need to be able to prepare your people for what it is that's coming. You've got to find the people who connect with your message, who connect with your specific tone, your worldview, and your level of vulnerability before you actually print anything. And that takes time to be able to figure out. Not everybody on your list is going to be interested in your book, and that's okay. You might actually attract new people. When you start writing, if you use a space like Substack, you actually start to attract people to you. who are interested in not just what it is that you offer in your business, but they're also interested in you as a person. And so this actually helps you to build more loyalty towards the thing that it is that you want to be able to create in your business. I was just listening to something yesterday. Somebody was talking about how they were talking about how people put visibility before they actually something about making visibility more important than the loyalty of the people that you bring to your business. And so the person used an example of a some type of a social media influencer who had like a million some odd followers, and they wanted to sell a thing. I think it was like a t-shirt or something for $20 and couldn't sell a single t-shirt. That is so sad, child. That is so sad. How the hell do you have a million followers and not a single person wanted to buy a doggone t-shirt from you? You know, so they like your cute pictures and all that other stuff, but they're not interested in actually spending any money with you on a $20 t-shirt. You know, the $20 is not a bunch to be able to ask for something. I can understand if this was like some high ticket thing. You know, but $20, you know, I can see a person actually, you know, sort of falling into a depression over that over time. But my point here was to be able to say that you actually have to prepare people for these things. You have to prepare people to buy this particular story from you. And when you're writing a book, you've got to be able to understand what it is that you want out of this when you're actually doing your writing. So that's really part of the reason why I actually really love Substack, is because, you know, storytelling comes to the forefront. It's not so much of, you know, look at how much I know about the thing that I am teaching about, but it's also a lot about sharing specific parts of yourself that you want to be able to bring to the front. And that actually creates more loyalty amongst your customers. You don't necessarily need millions of followers, because I know people who have, you know, rather small followings, but they're multimillionaires, multimillionaires on the internet. So yeah, I think that's important to know, that you can use your Substack to be able to build an audience. And you build an audience if you want, if you know that you want to be able to write a book. If you know that you want to be able to write a book, test out your message on Substack or something like it first. Hold on one second. Get rid of that message. So this is what I guess you can call it, like a sandbox strategy, and the power of working in small increments. The fastest way to really just burn yourself out on all of this is to stall or to lock yourself in a room and try to stare down a terrifying, empty 200-page document with a heavy final deadline looming over your head. Meaning that a lot of people, you know, they want to write a book and they're absolutely starting from absolute zero. You know, maybe you've never written before, you don't have a writing practice, you know, so you're sort of forcing yourself into this energy of trying to be a book writer, but you haven't really done it before. But now you have to figure out how to be able to do that. If you had just done the Substack, you know, you would already, like, there would already be a wheel in motion. You know, there would already be a wheel in motion for a lot of people to be able to move that forward. And, you know, it's not like you have 200 empty pages that are sitting there blank, and you got to figure out what to put in it. If you had the Substack, you would already know what to put in it, because you can just, you can kind of just take what it is that you've written and the things that were the most popular, and turn that into something for yourself. Substack is nice because it's a really sort of a low stakes kind of an environment. It's low stakes with a high yield testing ground. It sort of forces you to treat your book as sort of like a series of digestible, 500 to maybe 1,000 words of however you write, in prose, notes, thoughts. I'm thinking about what's the comedian Marco something. He has a TV podcast or a YouTube podcast called Open Thoughts. He's a funny dude. But yeah, your own personal open thoughts, and just to see what lands. If it doesn't land, you don't need to write about it again. But if it does, and it doesn't having it land doesn't necessarily mean that it goes viral. Having it land means that, if you use Substack has its own sort of social media app within the app, called Notes, and you can share notes in there. It's like Threads or a Twitter before it went to hell. And you can sort of share, if it gets shared a couple of times or even liked a few times, if people leave comments, if you get a couple of comments, that's feedback. What you want is feedback. You're not necessarily looking for virality here. You're looking for people who resonate with what it is that you have to say. And don't necessarily think about it as writing newsletters, although Substack does call itself a newsletter app. What you're building is really you're using Substack as a place to be able to build your writing muscles in public. You get to write about scenes from your life that make sense. If you're like, I'm a person who likes to be able to share life lessons. This particular year, I turned 49 years of age, which is significant for me because my mom passed away of breast cancer when she was 49, 20 years ago. So I am thinking about the lessons that I've learned up through the age of 49 and going into 50. And so I'm sort of gathering that information. And so that by the time I hit 50 years old, I have these sort of vignettes that I've written out of what was important to me and what my life will look like moving forward. And thus far, it seems to be resonating with people, particularly women who are in midlife and are looking to write a book or just to be able to write again, to get into the practice of writing. And so that's really what I'm personally using my Substack for. And I'm sharing this method because if you want to be able to write a book, or even if you just want to be able to write an ongoing Substack, you're really learning how to let what it is that you want to be able to write about breathe, if that makes sense. It'll take on a life of its own. So you don't necessarily think of it as, a boring, when I don't know, when I hear the word newsletter, it's often really just sort of a boring official corporate document that doesn't really, you get some, news of what's happening in the company. There's an employee of the month, that sort of stuff. Nobody really cares about that. It's many pieces of your personal story that you are sharing with people. And that's really what the difference is here, between writing, a tight corporate newsletter and writing on Substack. Um, so you're building your writing muscle in public. You're sort of trying out different things, particularly in the very beginning, and you're sort of building out what it is that you want to be able to write about. And this is so important because you start to collect data. I sort of started to talk about this before. You get to be able to track where people lean in on what it is that you're writing about. So you can end all of the guesswork. You're writing in public for 6 to 12 months, which that'll help you to get rid of some of that creative anxiety. And you get to stop wondering if your stories are hitting the mark because people in the room will already tell you. The people who are in the room on your Substack, whether they're free or paid subscribers, they will tell you whether or not they like your stuff or not. And when you get that feedback, what's going to happen here is that's where the conversation is going to start to deepen for you. You're going to see specific essays that get, people will share, or they'll make a comment. Um, they'll tell you what parts of your essay resonates with them. Um, there was a particular essay that I wrote about, like I explained before, about turning 49. And there was a particular part that resonated with people where I talked about learning how to be able to tell yourself the truth about what it is that you want in your life. And there were a handful of people that loved that part so much that they actually highlighted it and turned it into a shareable GIF, GIF, a GIF that they shared on Notes and other social media outlets. And then there were a few people who signed on to my Substack. And so I'm learning that when I share these sort of universal truths with people, which is really what memoir is about, when I share those universal truths, people grab onto that. People grab onto that. Um, and it's a good feeling to have that, but it's also great feedback to do more of that. Somewhere in you have more of that. It's not like a one-hit thing. You need to be able to find more of that when people start commenting and start sharing, and they start getting real specific about what it is that they liked, or maybe even maybe not that they liked it, but it resonated, or maybe they strongly disagreed if it was a viewpoint that you had. All of that feedback matters. And what is challenging for a lot of writers, particularly if you're a person who writes in your journal, my journal, if you're I don't know if you can see it, but it's a little chihuahua, a little Mexican chihuahua in the afterlife. Um, Writing in your journal only is kind of like, it's like writing into a void. And a lot of people, they write in their journal. And I love writing in your journal. You should continue to write in your journal. There's a space for your private thoughts, but there are also some things that I know that always pop up, and you're like, you know what, I would really love to be able to share this with people. But you don't really know how. You don't have a space to understand why or how to do that. And I think Substack is a great place to do that. Substack is also a place to be able to reverse engineer your book. And it really becomes, Substack becomes a sort of like this archive that you build, kind of by accident, but not really. By the end of the year, like you realize you're no longer starting from scratch. You're sitting on top of a living, pre-tested body of work that's already been validated by a real audience. And once you have that, that's when you're like, okay, well, now I have, some book ideas based on stuff that I've actually written and tested and put out in the real world and have gotten some feedback about. And then at that point, it becomes less about writing the book from absolute scratch to doing some deep, to doing a deep, serious editing of an archive that already exists. And I'm hesitating to use the word editing because a lot of people don't understand that there's different levels of editing. It's not that you're going to take all of your Substack essays and just staple them together and that's it. And for some people, editing is really, they just think it's only just proofreading, like correcting the spelling and the grammar and you're done. What I do, I'm a developmental editor. And as a developmental editor, I help you to sort of build the bones of what it is that you are writing. So what you can pull out your top performing essays, you get to audit the underlying, emotional framework that you might find in there. And then you get to arrange them in a cohesive structural outline. That's what I help people do as a developmental editor. I can support you in sort of figuring out what that looks like. And what you'll have is just a predictable manuscript. You've sort of reverse engineered your first draft of your book. The actual assembly of your book becomes streamlined, it becomes organized, and it's entirely grounded in, it's entirely grounded in how it is that you've proven resonance with people who have actually read your work. So I hope that makes sense. I really love Substack as a place to just be able to write. So many people want to be able to write a book. And then they go and they write a book, they put their heart and soul into it. And then they get to the end, they did whatever, put it up on Amazon or wherever it is that they were using. And then they put out a couple of social media posts, hey, I wrote a book, and they find out that nobody really cares. Nobody cares. They care about you as a human being, but they don't care enough to actually get up and buy the book and actually read it and to be able to actually, to engage you on what it is that you've written. What are the themes that you've written about? Because there's a process of getting people to care. You got to pull them into your world. Unless you're, somebody who's already famous. You're an Oprah Winfrey, I always say. If you're, a Will Smith. Will Smith has a memoir out. And if I'm not mistaken, that memoir came out after, the slap that was heard around the world. And even before the slap that was heard around the world, he has a long history of getting people to be interested in who he is and what he thinks, and how he moves in the world. He's not just a movie star. He's a person who loves to give us life lessons and tell us what he's thinking about. And he's done that for at least a couple of decades. So here you come, literally known by nobody, respectfully. Nobody knows who you are. And you write this big book, and then you realize that nobody's really interested in the bits pieces that you want to be able to share with people because they don't know who you are yet. You've got to give people, what am I saying? You've got to give people little breadcrumbs into getting people interested into who you are, why they should like you. How does your life compare to theirs? Have you solved some problems for yourself that they may need help solving? I think those things are important. I keep trying to tell myself that I'm not a Substack coach, but every time I love Substack so much, and because I love the utility of it, and I think there's a way. I see people who are teaching people how to be able to use Substack, and they're sort of approaching it as a how to go viral real quick type of a thing. And no disrespect to people who do it that way. But if you are a writer, who wants to be able to meet people where they are and share your life lessons, and you're not necessarily a famous person, Substack is a great way for you to be able to start doing that in small increments. And I was also sharing with I had a small class in my learning how to write for magazines class. And for those who were in the class, both in that one and in the class that I had taught before, people stop short of actually writing the actual pitch to the actual magazine. And I think part of it is because they don't have a regular writing practice. They haven't practiced, so it's a bit of imposter syndrome. They don't feel like, well, my idea isn't good enough yet. I'm not, I'm not, am I worthy enough to be able to pitch this? And am I, smart enough? Do I have enough education? And it's because you've never really written anything that that you feel like is really resonating with people. Because there's a switch that goes off in your brain the first time you write something and you get feedback on it. And what I realized was that when I started writing for magazines on a regular basis, I already had years of writing experience as a blogger. I've been a blogger since 2004-ish, in the super early days of blogging, when blogging was super new. I had a blog for my life where I was working in education, and I also had a blog where I was working, not working. I had switched to a different blog where I started to write about my life and my health and my journey with fibroids, and learning how to be able to take care of myself by, learning about food and, going to farmers markets and, self-care and just that sort of inner conversation that I was having about how I had been treating myself for a long time. And eventually getting to a point where I was like, I really would love to be able to live in international life, and that led to the, the life that I have now. And yesterday I put out the video talking about how I'm on my 8-year international travel anniversary. You can go back and watch that if you would like. And so because I have that experience, it's easier for me to just say, just put the thing out, just go ahead and do that. And you've got to build an identity of being a writer. So when I sent in my first magazine pitch, when I sent in my first magazine script, I already had the identity of being a writer. It wasn't necessarily scary for me because I'd written for years. And not that you have to write for years. You don't have to write for years in order to feel ready to be able to write for magazines or to write a book. You can literally do this in 3 to 6 months. 3 to 6 months of focus, and you can go on to do other projects because you will have gained some experience in getting feedback on what it is that people like or don't like about your writing. So that's what I wanted to share today. So a couple of things. If you want to work with me, first, I would love to be able to have you as a subscriber on my Substack. What I'm doing right now is I'm doing a weekly, I used to do these Wednesday AM meditative writing sessions, and I'm turning that into my Substack. And so every week I share a meditative writing prompt, where if you're a person who likes to sort of go deep within and sort of excavate your own wisdom about what it is you know, what it is that you feel, particularly for my ladies in midlife. You've got a bit of wisdom that you want to be able to share with people, and you can do this privately. And for those prompts that I put out, I make the comments private for those who are paid subscribers. That part of it I'm making for paid subscribers. Just because it'll be a smaller group of people, where there's a bit of I don't want to say anonymity, but just a feeling of privacy, of being in a group of people who are sort of there for the same reasons. And it's just everything is not for public consumption on the internet. So certainly subscribe to my Substack. If you already have a manuscript that you would like for someone, particularly me, to be able to read and give you feedback on how it is, what's going well with your manuscript and what you can improve, and give you some real steps on what to do next to move you towards the finish line, which is publishing, then I'm leaving a link in the description to tell you where to get how you can set up an assessment session with me. It's a 30-minute session where we get to talk about who you are, what you're trying to do, and whether or not we're actually a good fit, because everybody isn't a good fit. It's not a cheap service. I need to say that. Not a cheap service. But it is a useful service. It's a useful service. Don't just throw a book out there in the wind and hope and pray that it'll work out for you. You don't want to do that. If you are a more serious writer and you want to be able to invest in the book that you're writing, I think that this is a great way for you to go. So, what else? I think that's it. That's it. So thank you so much for hanging out with me today. That is the video. Please do like this video, subscribe to the video, leave a comment. I would love to, if this is helpful, or if you have questions about Substack or about writing books, I would love to be able to know what your thoughts are. Peace.